Watch this.
This is the first one I can think of where we've set up a crime for who somebody is.
Is it about protecting women's spaces or just targeting people who are transgender for political gain? A bill that criminalizes certain folks using the bathroom and changing room is one signature away from becoming law. Idaho keeps losing ag land, 140,000 acres according to the last census. But should it be about feeding people or housing them? The conversation from a recent planning and zoning meeting shows it's not straightforward. The latest so-called bathroom bill is headed to the governor's desk. It would criminalize people who knowingly enter the bathroom that does not align with their sex assigned at birth. It was a lengthy and at times very emotional debate today before the Senate did pass that bill, HB 752. Now, it's not just bathrooms we're talking about here. The legislation includes changing rooms, locker rooms, and shower rooms. If there's a repeat offense, it becomes a felony and could be punishable by up to 5 years in prison. There are some exceptions, including if there is only a single-sex bathroom available, if a person is helping someone who requires medical assistance, if there is dire need to use the restroom, or when a parent or family member is helping out a child. Senator Jim Woodward said the bill's origins come from an incident at the Sandpoint YMCA last summer. A male was reportedly in the female locker room where the local high school swim teams change. He said this sparked a town-wide conversation.
And what I learned in that conversation and what I see in this bill is the term public accommodation. And I believe that placing this requirement on a public accommodation, I think this is a foray into new territory. And I'm cautious about that. Just as a few years back, and I think my earlier years here in the Senate, that I didn't know the term a private right of action, but that's become routine in our legislation. And so I wonder, with the idea of a public accommodation, what comes next and how much further do we venture inside of a private building? Now, I don't support the punitive measures in this bill, but the policy does reflect the sentiment of my community. And so for that reason, I will support it. It is the best for the most.
Now, supporters say it's about protecting women and kids from grown men in intimate spaces. One of the bill's sponsors, Ben Taves, says this would not target people who mistakenly use a different restroom than they meant to.
Sometimes it feels like we're not even talking about the same subject, because the majority of what or actually all of what we're trying to solve here is not targeting any one group of people or any one person. It's dealing with sexual predators and very real issues.
But those against the bill questioned how realistic it is to even enforce this, and that it will accomplish the real unstated goal to just target and harm people who are transgender.
We just say to trans people, unless you are in dire need, and these are the words from the statute, of defecating or urinating, stay out. Figure out some other way. This isn't how we treat people in our society.
And yet it did pass 28-7, and again it's now headed to the governor's desk. Well, this is one of the biggest issues we knew the Idaho legislature would debate this year. Now, Medicaid cuts are moving forward. 2 weeks ago, the Senate killed the budget for Health and Human Services, but took a second crack at it yesterday. And this time, they did pass the budget that now includes even more cuts for Medicaid services. This new budget takes $21 million from disability services, missing out on almost $44 million in additional federal funds, and has a one-time removal of $14 million in federal funding for child care. All that's on top of the cuts from the last budget that failed. So bottom line, this budget that passed cuts almost $352 million, or nearly 6% for the coming fiscal year from the Health and Human Services budget. Opponents say these cuts to life-saving programs don't even need to be made, since the budget shortfall can be overcome with rainy day funds they have ready to go.
You know, we call those reserves our rainy day fund. And we say that because we're in a strong economy, we justify not using even a modest amount because we say it's not raining. So, Senators, if it's not raining when we pass budgets like this one, why do I get the feeling that so many good people in Idaho are about to get wet?
The budget shortfall that we're in is self-inflicted, and it's due to a tax cut that primarily benefited folks that were in higher income brackets. Most of us got about $100 off on our taxes. Most Idahoans did. So now we're here today having to cut really critical services for some of our most vulnerable populations.
But supporters of this budget and these cuts say they strike a balance between even deeper cuts and not making cuts at all, which they just do not see as an option.
Yes, we are having some revenue issues, but we also have spending issues. Let's make sure that that picture is clear. It's both revenue and spending is what our problem is here.
This is a reduction of $351,680,600 or 5.8%. Some folks like that. Some folks hate that. Some wish that it were an increase of 5.8%. Some would rather have it decrease more than this is. This is the effort that was made to bring to you an opportunity to cast your vote regarding a huge budget that's a big part of our overall budget.
Speaking of that vote, the budget again did pass 22-13, relatively close. Now heads to the House of Representatives. We are more than 75 days into the session now and expect just a few days in the State House left. Lawmakers are trying to make every last hour and bill count. Here's more from week 11 in case you missed it. A new law stops the release of photos that show people who died in cases being investigated by law enforcement. Governor Brad Little signed Senate Bill 1250 into law on Thursday. This comes after the families of the victims of the University of Idaho murders fought against the release of crime scene photos. The city of Moscow, though, told the court they had to release those photos because of Idaho's public records law. After this new law takes effect in July, though, only the victims' family members will be able to request those images. The bill got unanimous bipartisan support. Olivia Gonsalves, the sister of Kaylee Gonsalves, was a champion of this legislation.
I hope that there is not another family that has to experience this, but I pray that this brings them a little bit of peace, if it ever does, for the after phase that I was wholly unprepared for.
This is actually the second bill in the 2026 legislative session that relates to the Moscow murders. There was also an update to an existing law that will now bar prisoners from making money off their crimes through books, movies, and other media. Another new law will allow the State Board of Education to develop a framework to teach students about AI and how it should be used. The law does not replace learning with AI, but instead finds ways to use it responsibly as a tool.
Every teacher and anyone involved in education is, even at the higher ed level, they're talking about what the appropriate place and understanding is for AI for the student. And so you look at it as a professional tool. What does that look like? How do we establish those parameters? And that's what this legislation is intended to do.
Any guidance on using AI in schools must protect students' data as well. This session's flag bill is headed to the governor's desk after the House approved Senate amendments. The whole purpose of the bill is to force the city of Boise to take down the pride flag. If passed into law, House Bill 561 would force government entities to pay a $2,000 fine per non-approved flag per day. Those amendments will allow government entities to fly flags of other countries that the U.S. is friendly with and to mark special occasions, as well as allow the use of the Basque flag. There's also a laundry list of other exceptions, pretty much everything besides the pride flag. If the governor signs this into law, it would take effect immediately, unlike most laws that would kick in July 1st. Idaho school districts are facing skyrocketing costs to support students with high needs, sometimes more than an entire small district budget. But a bill that's heading to the governor's desk aims to help cover those expenses. Senate Bill 1288 looks to set aside $5 million to support districts facing those high costs. If a student costs more than $30,000 to teach, districts will be able to pull from the $5 million state fund. For parents fighting for their child's education, it's about more than dollars in budgets.
Not only is it critical for my daughter to attend school and get her education as well as the other services that she needs there, speech, OT, but I think just her being in the classroom gives those other students something that's really hard to teach.
An election-related bill is headed to the governor's desk. House Bill 831 makes it clear that students are not allowed in school district buildings that are being used as a polling location. Lawmakers who argued in favor of the bill say it's meant to increase safety for the kids. Teachers can have class if it's in a building that's not being used for elections. It passed the Senate yesterday, and if the governor signs it into law, it would go into effect in 2028. Maybe you've heard, Idaho is experiencing historic growth. And to make room for that boom in population, working ag land is being taken out of commission. But it's not that simple. It's not a matter of if, but when. Growth and growing pains for southern Idaho are not letting up anytime soon. Developments are hitting agricultural lands, the foundation of what Idaho was built on. But last night, a hearing in the Canyon County Planning and Zoning Committee saw a community rallying together to try to stop that potential loss of ag land. Here's Cooper Morgan.
Tractors. They're a familiar feature as you drive through Canyon County. But Nathan Piercy has noticed fewer and fewer of them as the farmland around him shrinks.
When you replace agricultural land, it's a one-way street. Like, no one's ever going to tear out a subdivision and put farmland back in. Once you lose farmland, you lose it forever.
Now, county leaders are weighing whether this land should stay agricultural or become the next neighborhood. Nathan moved in the area in 2015. Back then, he says it was mostly fields, and his driveway just off Ustick Road. Now, those fields are turning into neighborhoods.
Yeah, so when we moved out here, there wasn't houses to the west or east of us. They put two larger properties to the west of us, 4 or 5 acres, and the 3 2-acre lots. And then they want to put a bunch of, hundreds of houses up by Timberstone, just over the ridge, off of Ustick.
A proposed rezoning would convert 150 acres of ag land into residential development, a change supporters say is needed to accommodate growth.
Providing housing, there's a lot of demand for this kind of housing, and there's a lot of demand for probably almost every kind of housing around here at this point.
Brent Orton is a civil engineer with Orton Engineering, part of the developing team. He says this land can do more for the community as homes than as crops.
Well, the developers are actually farmers, and they farm a lot of property all around, so they would like to use this property is difficult for them to make a profit with. So they'd like to be able to put this property to a better use and be able to focus on their water, even on their other farms. They borrow water from other farms to make this work.
After months of anticipation, the debate came to life in a meeting that stretched for hours. The Canyon County Planning and Zoning Commission held a hearing Thursday night, reviewing new materials and taking additional testimony from both the developer and people living in the area. The commission voted unanimously to recommend denial of both the comprehensive plan amendment and conditional rezone. But the final decision now returns to the Canyon County Commissioners. For neighbors like Piercy, the debate goes beyond zoning maps or housing numbers.
I understand the dynamics of every family and their finances, and it's hard. Farming's hard. There's a reason I'm not a professional farmer. It's not easy. But like, just because you buy land and it's out in the country doesn't mean you have the right to hack it up into the smallest pieces possible to make as much money as possible.
What's really at stake is a way of life he fears could disappear.
Because I like the country lifestyle. I don't want to live in a subdivision where my neighbors are 30 feet away. And I want to have cattle, and I want my kids to grow up in a place, where we know most of the neighbors, and we have a good lifestyle and clean living and clean air.
County commissioners are expected to take up the issue again in the coming weeks, where a final decision will be made. We also reached out to the developers for next steps, but we haven't heard back quite yet.
Yeah, I grew up in Meridian. Used to be surrounded by fields. Not so much anymore. Now surrounded by subdivisions. But also I understand the developers' take that, people are buying these houses. People keep moving in. Got to put them somewhere.
Yeah, right. There was just a lot of development even when I was just driving out there. There's just so much. People were chipping on a golf course right next to where this guy lived. So,
Cooper, thank you for that great story. More of the 208 after this.
Based on those photos, spring is definitely springing. It is like a spring dream outside today. 65 degrees and sunny. Not too many clouds outside as high pressure is dominating. Winds are light right now. There's no wind chill as we are well above 50 degrees and winds don't really make it feel cooler outside. In fact, we have some southerly winds which will make it feel more pleasant with that sunshine. Kind of just a light breeze in between Mountain Home and further east into the western Magic Valley. I've seen sustained winds reach about 10, maybe 15 miles per hour this afternoon. So a slight breeze out there. If you run cold, you may want to wear a light jacket, but generally it's going to be a really pleasant evening tonight and for the weekend ahead of us. If you're going to Treefort, fantastic news from here on out. Tomorrow, the afternoon high should be 73 and Sunday will basically repeat Saturday. It'll be partially cloudy skies this weekend, lots of sunshine and just really mild conditions as winds are expected to stay light as well. We can thank these calm, mild temperatures to high pressure, which is ushering in some southerly air, helping us climb in temperatures over the next 24 hours. We'll stay pretty steady by the time we reach the 70s tomorrow. We'll hold there through Sunday, but then changes come next week as we're watching a system near the Gulf of Alaska. That's going to swing south eventually and give us a bit of a weather shakeup. But for now, things are very nice. Tomorrow morning, our low temperature should sit right around what's average for this time of year. Upper 30s for the Magic Valley, mid to upper 30s for most of the Treasure Valley, but lower Treasure Valley like Ontario could still see sub-freezing temperatures, although it won't be as cold as what we saw earlier today when parts of the Treasure Valley and the Magic Valley were down into the low 20s. So it was very cold this morning following that brisk day yesterday, but now we are seeing temperatures on the up and up through the rest of this weekend. Tomorrow we'll see temperatures about 15 degrees above average. I think we've been a little bit spoiled with all the warmth that we've seen, that we're expecting conditions like this, but a reminder that our average temperatures this time of year in Boise is 58 degrees, and tomorrow we're expecting 73. So a fantastic day expected across the Treasure Valley. Mountain Home could make it to 75, even the higher mountain elevations like McCall and Stanley into the mid 50s. Haley and Fairfield a little further east into the upper 60s, pushing close to 70 like the Magic Valley if we move a little further south. Now Monday, we have a cold front that will come through and drop our temperatures. Nearly a 20-degree drop in temperatures from Sunday to Monday. We'll see winds get breezy following that cold front. Precipitation chances increase, but they don't really get extremely widespread until Wednesday. That's when we see our best chance of precipitation through Boise. Mountains could be seeing some significant snow next week in high elevations, but still several days away, so we'll continue to monitor that system. Let's check in on some traffic. Lots of events in downtown Boise this weekend. Tonight, we have, of course, Treefort events going on. We're looking at Broadway and Front on some ACHD cameras right now, but there's also a Steelheads game tonight as well as tomorrow. So lots of traffic in downtown Boise this weekend. Let's go ahead and check out some traffic flow. As you can see, it's more so that east end of downtown Boise that is the most congested. However, getting off the connector into downtown Boise, getting to Myrtle is pretty trafficy. Broadway is trafficy, so in and out of downtown is trafficy, and throughout it, unfortunately, as well.
Let's see what you have to say. Two different takes on the bathroom bill that we told you about at the top of the show. This person says, bathroom bill is to protect me. I'm a woman, do not want a quote unquote male person sharing the same bathroom as me. That is Jackie and Phyllis out of Meridian. But Ed in Meridian says this: I've never had a gay or transgender person demand I live my life in a certain way. Wish I could say the same about our Republican legislature. Another big issue today, those Medicaid cuts coming down the pipe. Sam in Meridian says, in a world full of Brad Littles, be a Jim Guthrie. Look forward to voting every one of the politicians who voted for disability cuts to Medicaid, voting them out. Primaries in May. Sam is looking forward to that. This also about the Medicaid cuts. So they're cutting the budget on Medicaid, but yet they're giving $50 million to parents to help pay for school choice. Bob against that. Also, finally here on the 208, this question: where is the 208 nowadays? This day is a day now-a-day. So, Audie, is this 208?
Yes, it is. Here it is. 208 on a Friday. Into the great weekend.
You can barely see her, but yes, this is the 208. You found it. Congrats.